They say the American dream is about hard work. That if you grind long enough, pay your dues, and smile just right during performance reviews, you'll earn your little slice of heaven. A nice house, a respectable title, maybe even a parking spot with your name on it. Let me introduce myself. My name is James Vickers, 43, former Senior Marketing Strategist at Roth Winchell, until I was unceremoniously escorted out with a cardboard box and a hollow, "It's not personal," but it was personal. The trouble began with something seemingly innocent. Lunchboxes. Yes, you heard me right. Mine was navy blue with a busted zipper and some leftover goldfish crumbs. My son's, Ryan, was Spider-Man. The other lunchbox in question belonged to little Hunter, shiny, monogrammed, and apparently hand-stitched by blind monks in Tibet. That one belonged to the son of my boss, Gregory Langston. Langston is the kind of guy whose tie costs more than your monthly rent and whose handshake feels like you owe him something. He's CEO of Roth Winchell, a man who's never once clicked reply all by mistake and refers to casual Fridays as morally loose. He plays golf with senators, drinks $300 of bourbon from a crystal decanter shaped like a bald eagle, and believes in something called corporate bloodlines. I, on the other hand, believe in earning your keep. I put myself through community, college, climbed the corporate ladder rung by bloody rung. I wear Target khakis and still get excited when Wendy's brings back the spicy nuggets, and apparently that was my crime. It started on a Thursday morning, rainy and grey. The kind of day that smells like betrayal. Ryan and I were running late. He couldn't find his left shoe, always the left, like some sort of cursed Cinderella, and I had a meeting with the Vision Alignment Task Force, which is just a fancy way of saying people Greg might fire next quarter. We pulled into the school parking lot like a bat out of hell, Willow Heights Academy, tuition $48,000 a year. Motto, virtues, honor, legacy. Translation, Daddy owns a yacht. Ryan slammed the door, bolted toward the building, and I turned to leave when I saw Greg Langston's Range Rover roll in next to my Honda Civic, like a lion pulling up beside a house cat. Our eyes met through the windshield. He smiled. Not the warm, toothpaste commercial smile he reserved for gala fundraisers, but a twitchy, curious grin, like he'd just spotted something out of place. A stain. A crack in the marble. The next day, during the team stand-up, he said my name with that same smile. "James, can I see you in my office?" Ah, the dreaded phrase. You never walk out the same way you came in. I stepped into his penthouse floor. Office with its glass walls and silent, omnipresent assistant who might actually be a robot. Greg gestured to the sleek leather chair across from his desk, which looked more like the helm of a battleship than a workspace. "Coffee?" he asked. "No, thank you," I said. He poured himself a cup anyway, watching me with the faintest whiff of amusement. "So, funny thing. Hunter came home yesterday and mentioned that your son, Ryan, is it, goes to Willow Heights." I nodded. "Yes, he does." Greg sipped his coffee. "Didn't realize you were part of that community." "That community?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the school?" He chuckled. "Don't get me wrong, it's just, well, it's an elite environment, a certain pedigree. My wife runs the parent board. She was quite surprised. I'm just trying to give my kid the best education possible," I said evenly. "We got in on a merit scholarship." He didn't respond right away. He swirled his cup, looked out at the city like a Bond villain considering the next country to buy. Then he said it. "James, don't you think it's confusing for the children? The boundaries, I mean. It sends a strange message. You're part of my team at work, and your son is competing with mine in Latin club?" I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, but there wasn't one. "So," he continued, "I've been re-evaluating the structure of our departments, downsizing some roles, streamlining the org chart. There it was. You're firing me because my son goes to the same school as yours?" "Fair course not," he said, laughing like I'd just accused him of witchcraft. "This is purely a business decision, nothing to do with your personal choices." I walked out without saying another word. You ever had your whole world unravel? In a moment so absurd it felt like satire, like you'd slipped into some B-grade Netflix drama titled The Petty Billionaire. That night, Ryan asked if we were still going to the father-son science fair next month. I lied and said yes. I couldn't tell him we might not afford tuition next semester. I couldn't tell him I'd been torpedoed because his classmates' father had an ego the size of Jupiter. Instead, I smiled and told him to pass the ketchup. Unemployment is a bitter drink, and I drank deep. I applied for jobs. I updated my LinkedIn. I even considered writing a Medium post called "How My Boss Fired Me Because My Kid Was Too Smart." But then, something curious happened. I got a call from Janice, one of the assistants at Roth and Winchell. She whispered into the phone like she was passing state secrets. "You didn't hear this from me," she said, "but they've already filled your role. Guess who got it?" Who? Greg's nephew, Darren. The one who got a DUI last summer and tried to write it off as a branding experiment. Of course, the world had made its choice. Loyalty was a coupon with an expiration date, and mine had just expired. That's when the idea began to bloom. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a slow drip, like a leaky faucet above a bucket of gasoline. It takes patience, precision, a smile so polite it makes people nervous. I didn't want Greg's money. I didn't want to expose the corruption or sue for wrongful termination and get buried in a forest of NDAs. No. I wanted something far sweeter. I wanted his son, precious little Hunter, to wish he'd never learned Latin. I wanted Greg to walk into that polished, prestige-stained world of his and feel the floorboards rot beneath his Ferragamo shoes. I was going to make him watch his own kingdom crumble. From the inside, it started with a fake profile. Trevor Miles, I called him, ex-Harvard, tech investor, father of twins, just moved to town, looking for elite schools, joined every local Willow Heights parent group on Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. It's amazing what rich people will share with a stranger who also claims to have flown private to Aspen. Within a week, I was on a call with Victoria Langston, Greg's wife. She thought she was speaking to a fellow alumni donor from her boarding school. "I can get you on the list for the spring gala," she cooed. "We're very selective, you know." "Oh, I understand completely," I said. "It's all about values, legacy, and keeping out certain elements." She laughed too hard at that. What she didn't know yet was that I had hacked her entire social calendar. I knew where she shopped, when her tennis instructor came over, Tuesdays at 3 p.m., by the way, and that she once wrote a Yelp review about caviar being too salty for her aura. I wasn't going to destroy them with noise. I was going to destroy them with silence. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For now, let me just leave you with this image. Greg Langston, golden boy of Roth and Winchell, sipping his imported espresso, in a corner office, blissfully unaware that the janitor wheeling the mop outside was actually me, in a disguise. Revenge is best served not cold, but calculated, and I was just getting warmed up. There's something deliciously ironic about using a disguise so obvious that people ignore it completely. People like Greg Langston don't see janitors, or substitute teachers, or Uber drivers. They see scenery, props, noise. So I became the noise. In the weeks following my termination, I picked up shifts through 3 separate third-party vendors, one for janitorial work, one for event staffing, and one, my personal favorite, as a driver. For Lux Fleet Elite, a service Greg's wife once called acceptable in a pinch. I was everywhere the Langstons went, and they didn't even know it. But the real fun was happening under the name Trevor Miles. Trevor had built quite the profile. LinkedIn full of buzzwords like angel investor, disruptive solutions, and emerging philanthropy. Instagram littered with staged latte art, pretentious captions, and the occasional yacht photo I lifted from a Turkish billionaire's profile. I was a mirage. A ghost with a trust fund. Victoria Langston loved Trevor. She introduced him to everyone at the Willow Heights Spring Gala, like he was the next Zuckerberg. She even asked if his twins, fictional of course, would be joining Willow in the fall. "I'm just vetting the environment," I told her. "Want to make sure it aligns with our values." That word again. Values. The Spring Gala was held at the Langstons' estate, a home so obscenely large it had wings. Literal architectural wings. A north wing just for Greg's reading sanctuary. a south wing for guest overflow, and a wine cellar that could house a small country's GDP. I arrived early, posing as one of the catering managers, clip-on tie, clipboard, Bluetooth headset that didn't work. No one questioned me. In fact, most of the staff didn't even make eye contact. When you carry a tray of caviar blinis, you're invisible. Exactly. How I liked it. Now let's talk about Hunter Sweet privileged, painfully average Hunter Langston, 13 going on 30, wearing loafers with no socks, and calling his Latin teacher by her first name. Ryan had always outperformed Hunter in every subject, especially STEM, and that grated Greg to no end. It wasn't just that my son shared a classroom with his, it was that mine outshone his. So I did what any vindictive former marketing strategist would do. I began a whisper campaign. Through Trevor, I got access to the Willow Heights Inner Circle WhatsApp group, a digital coliseum where parents traded rumors like currency. I started small. One message from Trevor read, "Anyone else hear about that weird thing with Hunter Langston and the stolen chemistry test? Probably just gossip." Then I let the fire feed itself. 3 other parents chimed in. "Yes, my son said something about that too. Wasn't there a disciplinary hearing last semester? He did get mysteriously dropped from the Honor Society." None of it was true. But in communities like Willow Heights, truth is less important than optics. Suddenly, Hunter was radioactive. Kids whispered. Teachers grew cautious. And Victoria started receiving calls from the PTA asking if everything was okay at home. Greg predictably tried to squash it. He sent a strongly worded email to the head of school demanding an internal audit of inappropriate gossip. I intercepted that email. How? Simple. Remember Janice, the assistant who first tipped me off? She hated Greg even more than I did. Turns out he once cut her holiday bonus in half because she wore orthopedic shoes to the Christmas party. Janice had access to everything: emails, calendars, private messages. She forwarded me daily digests, like I was the head of Homeland Security. Thanks to her, I knew Greg was planning a reputation salvage campaign. He was organizing a lavish charity event called Tech for Tomorrow, set to be hosted in, get this, the Willow Heights Auditorium. He wanted to prove to the community that Hunter was just misunderstood and that the Langstons were still pillars of moral excellence. Perfect. Let's talk about sabotage. Sabotage is an art form. It's not about chaos. It's about friction, just enough to make everything wobble. I volunteered Trevor as the lead sponsor for Tech for Tomorrow, offered to match donations, and even suggested bringing in a guest speaker, a tech guru, named Maxwell Drayton, who'd overcome learning disabilities to launch a billion-dollar app. Maxwell didn't exist, but he had a website, a Wikipedia stub, a series of stock photos on his social media featuring him shaking hands with celebrities, AI-generated, of course. Victoria loved him. I got Janice to accidentally book the auditorium with another event, the second-grade spring recital, which meant Greg had to grovel to the elementary dean, a woman he once described as functionally obsolete. Strike one. Then I sent an anonymous tip to the press. Concerned parent here. Curious why a school event is being used as a PR stunt to cover for a disciplinary scandal involving the CEO of Roth and Winchell's son. Strike two. And on the night of the event, I sent a pizza delivery to the front gate addressed to Hunter Langston, professional plagiarist, along with 20 helium balloons that read, "It's not cheating if Daddy pays." Strike three. Greg. Exploded. Janice forwarded me the email he sent the next morning. "If anyone finds out who's behind this, I want them gone. I don't care if it's a parent, teacher, or the goddamn janitor. Heads will roll." Oh, Greg, you have no idea how right you are. The final move came the day of the Board of Trustees' annual review, a very hush-hush meeting where the school decides on tuition hikes, staffing changes, and most importantly, expulsions. Guess who got added to the agenda? Hunter, but not for plagiarism, not for test stealing, no, for cyberbullying. See, one of the fake accounts I created under Hunter's name had been messaging another student anonymously with threats, mockery, and a few "your mom" jokes for flavor. Awful. I know. But when I leaked screenshots to the board via a concerned student, they didn't question much. Why would they? The Langstons had been under fire for weeks now. The smoke was already in the air. All I had to do was fan it. I heard Victoria burst into tears in the parking lot. Greg tried to claim the account was fake, but when pressed for evidence, he said, and I quote, "We don't monitor our son's devices like prison guards." Bad move. That very night I got a message from Janice. "Hunter's on probation. Greg is furious. He's blaming everyone, firing people left and right." I sipped my wine and smiled. Now, you might be wondering, what about me? While all this was unfolding, I was quietly rebuilding. I took a consulting gig with a rival firm, Westbrook Analytics, run by a man who hated Greg Langston with biblical intensity. The moment I walked in and said, "He fired me because our kids went to the same school," Westbrook hired me on the spot. He even said, "Let's destroy him slowly." Boss of the year. But my revenge wasn't complete yet. There was one final. Dale. You see, Roth Winchell was preparing for a merger, a massive, messy merger with a tech firm out of Seattle called Evergrid. This was Greg's golden goose, his retirement plan, his swan song, his "I'm better than you" parade float. The final due diligence report was due by Monday, and thanks to Janice, I had a copy, along with access to the one piece of information that could ruin everything. Greg had inflated quarterly numbers by leveraging projections as real revenue. Accounting trickery 101. Enough to skate under the radar until someone whistled. So I did. Trevor Miles, concerned investor and advocate for transparent capitalism, sent an anonymous email to Evergrid's legal counsel. Attached, a detailed breakdown of all Greg's financial optimism. By Friday, the merger was off. By Monday, Greg was under internal investigation. By Wednesday, the board had forced him to step aside. And by Thursday, Janice emailed me 3 words. "It is done." I drove by the Langston house that weekend. The lights were dim, the windows dark. The Range Rover gone. Maybe they'd taken a trip. Maybe Greg was sobbing into a stack of now worthless stock options. Maybe Hunter was wondering why people at school suddenly called him Fake News Freddy. Did I feel bad? Honestly, not even a little. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice, about class warfare, micro scale. About reminding people like Greg Langston that power is rented, not owned. And sometimes the janitor has the master key. There's a certain quiet that settles in when your enemy has been publicly humiliated. It's not triumph, it's not peace. It's a silence that asks, "What now?" And I had an answer. You see, while Greg Langston was licking his wounds and explaining to the press why Roth and Winchell's merger fell through due to irreconcilable cultural misalignment, I exposed his cooked books, I was tying off loose ends. Some would say I'd already won. But that's the thing about men like Greg, they always come back. They crawl, they bargain, they rebrand. They publish self-help books, they make podcast rounds, they start new ventures with buzzwords like post-corporate evolution. No. If I was going to burn this thing down, I had to salt the earth. Let me walk you through it. Phase 1, turn the wolves on themselves. Greg's ousting triggered a chain reaction. See, Roth and Winchell wasn't a real company. It was a Jenga tower held together with ego and posturing. The moment the CEO fell, everyone scrambled for higher ground. Legal launched a full internal audit to protect themselves. Finance turned on PR. HR started leaking email records to the board. PR, they just stopped answering phones. But me, I was still invisible. Still Trevor Miles in some circles. Still Ryan's dad in others. Still that guy who used to work here to most. One of the Langstons' neighbors, Chad something, the kind of guy who plays golf in January, let it slip during a parents' brunch that Greg had been applying for advisory roles at mid-size firms. He's trying to reposition, Chad whispered, as if he were describing a hostage negotiation. Poor guy. I almost choked on my mimosa, so I planted a few seeds. Remember those fake LinkedIn profiles I used? One of them, Nancy Glenwood, fictional HR executive, posted an anonymous whistleblower thread on Medium, complete with doctored documents showing Greg's use of company funds for, let's call them discretionary indulgences, private, car rentals, resort stays. One transaction suspiciously labeled Discreet Luxury Companions LLC. Was it true? Mostly not. Did it matter? Not even slightly. Within 48 hours, it went viral. Not mainstream viral, but corporate LinkedIn viral, which is worse. That crowd doesn't forget. They forward, they screenshot, they whisper behind overpriced. Latte's Greg's name was mud. The Greg Langston repositioning tour died before it left the driveway. Phase 2. The willing executioner. I didn't expect Janice to be so enthusiastic. After Greg's collapse, she got promoted to acting chief of staff under interim leadership. Turns out she'd been biding her time for years, quietly documenting every offense, every tantrum, every petty retaliation he'd ever thrown her way. When I told her what I had in mind for the finale, she didn't hesitate. I want to read it into the record, she said, face lit with a fire I hadn't seen before. At the shareholders' meeting in front of everyone. Are you sure? I asked. This goes beyond professional suicide. I'm not suicidal, she smiled. I'm radioactive. We crafted a script, me in the background, her at the podium. A detailed presentation of ethical violations, financial misconduct and personal vendettas carried out under Greg's leadership. Names, dates, even audio clips. She'd started recording conversations after he called her a glorified post-it dispenser. The shareholders' meeting, normally a dull 5-hour endurance test for the wealthy, became a bloodbath. A few people walked out. One guy vomited into a reusable tote bag. And Janice? She dropped the mic, literally, and walked straight into a job offer from a rival firm across town. My partner in crime, ladies and gentlemen. Phase 3. Willow Heights implosion. Now let's turn our attention back to the school. Sweet, sacred Willow Heights, the last fortress of Langston dignity. Not for long. Remember the fake cyberbullying account I created under Hunter's name? Well, someone from the board, not naming names, launched a digital investigation to trace the IP addresses. They hired a cybersecurity firm, one with just enough incompetence to leave a few logs exposed online. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I anonymously forwarded those logs to the local news station. Their anchor, a smug weatherman turned investigative reporter, ran with it like a dog with a stolen steak. Exclusive wealthy family at center of cyberbullying scandal at elite private school. I watched the segment 3 times. Victoria Langston was photographed leaving campus in tears. Hunter was temporarily withdrawn for mental health reasons. And several members of the PTA began demanding a full moral audit of the administration. Moral audit. In a school that sells uniforms embroidered with family crests and Latin mottos about honor. Poetic. But the best part, the Langston Scholarship Donation Fund was frozen. Turns out the board doesn't like scandal, unless they're the ones selling it in hardcover memoirs. Phase 4. The reveal. I was ready to walk away, truly. But something inside me. It wasn't anger anymore, it was something colder, more calculated. Needed Greg to know, to look me in the eye and see the ruin. So I arranged a meeting. Well, technically Trevor Miles arranged it. He invited Greg to a private equity roundtable at the Four Seasons. I paid for the room, the catering, the fake attendees. Hell, I even rented 4 actors to nod solemnly during Greg's prepared pitch. He walked in wearing a navy blazer too tight around the midsection. His smile looked stapled on. "You must be Trevor," he said, extending a hand. I took it. Then, I said, "No, Greg, I'm the guy you fired because my son sat next to yours in math class." His face froze. His brain took a second to catch up. What the hell is this? "This," I said, gesturing to the empty chairs, "is your exit interview." He tried to stand. I pushed a manila folder across the table. "Sit down. Read. It's everything. The emails, the fake profiles, the planted rumors, the whistleblower complaint." He glanced at the top page. His face went red. "You're insane," he muttered. "No," I said. "I'm just as entitled as you. The difference is I earned my seat. You inherited yours, and now you're bankrupt. In money, reputation, and legacy." He stood, fists clenched. "You think you've won?" I leaned in. "You think this was about winning?" I let that hang. "It was about the principle, Greg, about every person you dismissed, mocked, and used like a rung on your ladder. I just made sure that ladder snapped. He stormed out, and I never saw him again. 1 year. Later, Ryan got into MIT. We celebrated with burgers and milkshakes at the same diner we used to go to when I was still employed. He didn't know all the details of what happened. I kept most of it quiet. All he knew was that Dad found a better job and that the Langstons moved to Florida. I like to imagine Greg coaching Little League in a gated swamp, pretending to be humble. As for me, I'm consulting again, smaller companies, cleaner people. I even launched a podcast called Office Politics, where I interview whistleblowers, HR escapees, and people who've witnessed corporate meltdowns from the inside. It's doing well. Sometimes I think about revenge, how good it felt, how easy it was once I stopped caring about playing nice. Then I remember something Janice said the day we lit the final match. People like him always think they're safe, until someone like us proves them wrong. Amen. So if you ever get fired, for a stupid reason because someone thinks your kid is too good for their world, remember this. Take your time. Be patient. Stay invisible. Then destroy them so quietly that they don't even notice until the ground is gone. And always, always check who's cleaning the floors. They might be watching.